I thank the representative of Albania for his statement, and I now give the floor for the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We thank Martin Griffiths for his views. We welcome to the meeting the new Executive Director of UNICEF, Catherine Russell, and thank her for her report. We wish to note that we've seen the non-bias in Ukraine's reaction to this crisis over its last 8 years of its existence. The fund didn't turn a blind eye to the bombardments of Donbass, to the territory of Donetsk and Lugansk, and the problems for children that came from this in terms of the humanitarian and psychological situation. We hope that this non-biased approach will continue in the future. We think that UNICEF's views should be based on reliable, tried and tested information. We welcome the reflection in the humanitarian plan of the dangerous fact of the mass proliferation on Ukrainian territory of small arms and light weapons, many of which have fallen into the hands of radical elements, including those who have been deliberately freed from prison. The consequences of this irresponsible step by Volodymyr Zelensky, who gave the order, are already clear. The number of civilian victims among civilians from the hands of the radicals is increasing day by day, first and foremost in Kiev. We have been drawing attention to this for a long time. We call on all colleagues in the Security Council to strictly keep in today's meeting to the humanitarian context of the situation in Ukraine. We've already had the opportunity to exchange political views on what's happening, and it's clear that our views diverge from yours, and that you continue to rely on the opinion of Ukrainian politicians and also doubtful or openly mendacious material from social networks in presenting the course and aims of our special operation in Ukraine in an unfavorable light. We once again we agree with the representative of Albania that there is an information war going on, more likely a disinformation war, and we would say that in the West, in the free world, where Russian information resources are being turned off and where any information which contradicts your version of events is not allowed to be broadcast. The permanent representative of the United States today accused us of not complying with our commitments to create safe humanitarian corridors. Let's get down into this. We once again wish to emphasize that safety for civilians in Ukraine is not a problem for Russian, because we're not bombarding them, but rather Ukrainian radicals and neo-Nazis who are holding hostage whole towns and cities and are making use of citizens as a human shield, not allowing them to leave cities despite the fact that there are humanitarian corridors and that Russian units have declared a ceasefire. There are a panoply of examples of this. Thus, on the 4th of March, the Ministry of Defense of Russia and the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Irina Vereshchuk, agreed parameters for humanitarian corridors from Mariupol to Zaporozhye and from Volnovakha to Dnipropetrovsk. They were supposed to be opened at 10 in the morning on the 5th of March. At Kiev's request, the representatives of the International Red Cross were invited to the areas where these corridors were being opened. Our side was ready to provide wholehearted assistance in guaranteeing safety for the evacuation of these people. We informed the UN Secretariat of all of this in timely fashion. However, the radicals in Mariupol violated this agreement. As is clear from a radio conversation that was intercepted between two commanders of the Nationalist Battalion Azov that is in Volnovakha, the radicals there were told to shoot at the legs of those who were heading for the humanitarian corridors. Those who risked life and limb to try and leave Mariupol, when they reached the checkpoints to exit the city, were shot on sight by Ukrainian Nazis. There's a great deal of video evidence of this. In Mariupol alone, there were some 200,000 civilians who are in the crosshairs of the forces there. And those who are the humanitarians who are trying to offer assistance aren't able to get there and to prevent the catastrophe that is developing in the town. The critical situation for people in other regions of the country is they are also blockaded by nationalist battalions. We note that Ukrainian radicals, day by day, are showing their true face more clearly. The local inhabitants have said that they forced out the staff of a maternity clinic and then put a firing site in that clinic. They also completely destroyed one of the nursery schools in the city. In addition, we state officially that Ukrainian authorities have categorically refused to cooperate on evacuating people from Kharkov or Sumy. Considering the catastrophic humanitarian situation and its worsening in Kiev, Kharkov, Sumy and Mariupol, and also the personal request of President Emmanuel Macron to President Putin, the Russian armed forces stated that from 10 a.m. on the 7th of October, the 7th of March 2022, there will be a ceasefire, and they will open humanitarian corridors from Kiev, Mariupol, and Sumy towards Russian territory for those who wish to evacuate through that logistically viable route, but also towards Ukrainian territory. This information was conveyed the evening before to Kiev, to the specialized agencies of the UN, to the OSCE, the ICRC, and other international organizations through all available information resources, including the media. An official answer from Kiev was received only today at 7:10 a.m. at Moscow time, but the open humanitarian corridors towards the Russian Federation were ignored. This subject was raised in her official statement by the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Vereshchuk, who called the proposal to open humanitarian corridors towards Russia, and I quote, absurd and unacceptable, end quote. It is clear to us that the Kiev regime is making use of all available and unavailable methods to wholeheartedly stop the exit of those citizens who wish to leave to, and also foreigners who wish to go to Russia, because they're scared that once these people are free, they will tell the truth about the actions of Ukrainian radicals, as is being done by those people who've been able to get out away from these radicals. We're talking here about threats, intimidation, blackmail, physical violence, and also shooting on sight directed at citizens and also foreigners. By way of illustration, just one statement from the mayor of Sumy, Alexander Lysenko. This was made today together with the commander of a national battalion, and I quote, "There will not be any green corridors, no civilians will leave to Russia, and those who try to will be shot dead," end of quote. In their statements on the impossibility of evacuating Ukrainian citizens towards Russia, Ukrainian officials have ignored the fact that there are already Ukrainian refugees in Russia. From the area of the special military operation, more than 168,000 people have been evacuated to Russia, including 43,469 children. And in the last 24 hours, 5,550 people, including 740 children. The Russian border has been crossed by 19,256 private vehicles, and in the last 24 hours by 900 of them. We are also establishing temporary accommodation points. These are all ready for individual work with citizens, or rather civilians, arriving from Ukraine. Unfortunately, the issue of the evacuation of the population from other regions is also being politicized, as is the issue of humanitarian assistance. In particular, the requests of the Ukrainian party look absurd. These are the requests made to us just less than 3 hours before the opening of humanitarian corridors, asking us to guarantee the evacuation from a number of settlements that are under the control of the Russian armed forces. In this, none of the inhabitants of these inhabited places had said they wanted to evacuate. People were simply living in their houses and they're not threatened by anything. In parallel, we were asked to organise the evacuation of citizens from a number of cities which, for the time being, are under the control of the nationalist battalions. And, of course, we were also asked to provide alleged humanitarian goods from Ukraine to Melitopol and Berdyansk in the Zaporozhye region and in Kherson. This also looks cynical towards the inhabitants of these cities, because at the moment these regions are under the full control of the Russian armed forces, and their populations are continuing to live peacefully and have everything that they need, including humanitarian assistance from Russia, which has arrived to different regions of Ukraine, 500,000 tons of it. Madam President, we are also particularly concerned that the Ukrainian radicals are continuing to hold hostage as human shields more than 1,500 foreigners in a range of cities. We are working around the clock with the relevant diplomatic agencies on this issue. But foreigners are having very severe problems when trying to cross the border, when they're trying to leave towards Europe. We're talking here about citizens from a range of different countries, including African countries. We also draw your attention to a public statement by the Senegalese representative of the African Union on this issue. We are shocked by news of the inhumane attacks by nationalists on student accommodation, which has, among other things, caused the death of Indian students. With regard to the safety of UN personnel in Ukraine, and for us this is one of the priorities, currently the Russian troops have guaranteed the exit from Kiev of 180 UN personnel. When necessary, this support will continue. We are in constant contact with the UN Secretariat. We take a wholeheartedly responsible approach to resolving the humanitarian issues that Ukrainian citizens are facing. On the 2nd of March, on the base of the National Defence Management Centre, there was an interagency coordination staff created for humanitarian response in connection with the special operation carried out in Ukraine. This is working around the clock. The staff include the authorised representatives of all of the federal bodies of the executive, state corporations and entities of the Russian Federation. The main objective of the staff is to guarantee multifaceted humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainian population in the controlled regions and also in Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, also guaranteeing the safe evacuation of civilians from in Ukraine and other countries. Madam President, I also have to mention another aspect. The deployment of heavy weaponry, including anti-aircraft defence systems, mobile rocket launch systems, bombardment artillery in heavily populated areas. This is not a question of isolated incidents, but it's become a rule for Ukrainian nationalist battalions. The attempts of civilians to protest and to request that this weaponry be removed have brutally been stopped with threats of the use of weapons. The similar cowardice on the part of the combatants using the civilian population as hostages is not just deeply immoral, but also violates the norms of international humanitarian law, including Articles 57 and 58 of the first additional protocol to the Geneva Convention of 1949. Furthermore, in a number of cities, in particular in Odessa, it has been recorded that weaponry has been placed near or inside objects of cultural heritage in violation of Article 53 of this additional protocol. The break-off in the evacuation of the civilians from using humanitarian corridors is a violation of Article 75 of the additional protocol. And the footage published on social networks of torture and abuse of Russian troops who are being imprisoned is a violation of Article 14 of the Geneva Convention of 1949, which guarantees respect for the person and the dignity of troops under any circumstances. Colleagues, I encourage you to make the correct appraisal of all of these activities. We also expect the same from the UN's leadership. Otherwise, you will be encouraging Ukrainian radicals and neo-Nazis to new crimes. Madam President, in conclusion, I wish to once again firmly encourage our Western colleagues to convince the Ukrainian leadership to think finally about the safety of the Ukrainian and foreign citizens held hostage by radicals and to join in the work to open and to guarantee the safety of humanitarian corridors. If, of course, you still have any ways to influence the nationalists, we have greater and greater doubts about that. We, for our part, are ready to do such work. Thank you very much.
أشكر ممثل الاتحاد الروسي على بيانه.